Greetings, friends. My name is Jessa McLean, and I'm here to provide you with some blueprints of disruption. This weekly podcast is dedicated to amplifying the work of activists, examining power structures, and sharing the success stories from the grassroots. Through these discussions, we hope to provide folks with the tools and the inspiration they need to start to dismantle capitalism, decolonize our spaces, and bring about the political revolution that we know we need. We talk a lot about creating spaces here on Blueprints of Disruption, how to bring people together, build a sense of community, how to keep each other safe. What we don't talk about enough is something that encompasses all of that, and that is reducing COVID transmissions, especially when we're organizing events and setting examples for people. So we brought on someone from the COVID-aware community to provide accessible, undaunting ways we can better protect ourselves and our comrades. The idea here is to bridge any gaps that might exist in our movements that are clearly preventing people from incorporating COVID precautions into their events and their daily lives. Because we know everyone here listening understands the value of community care. We know we need to step it up when our governments have, cast our collective well-being aside. And the pandemic is no exception. I know it's been exhausting, especially on top of everything else that we have on our plate right now. But I am telling you, if you can just sit tight for the next 45 minutes, hear from Shira just how easy it is to do better, and why masking for your community is a revolutionary act. Go ahead and introduce yourself for me, please.
So I'm Shira Lurie. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm located in Chipuktuk, Halifax. And I am part of two organizations, primarily. Protect Our Province, Nova Scotia, which is a community care group focused on reducing COVID transmission through evidence-based mitigations. And the second group I'm a part of is called Mask for Mask Queers, which runs in-person COVID-safer events based on building community. It's focused on the queer community, but allies are welcome as well.
You put a tweet out there, and it was really like a one-liner. If you want to make your events or your organizations more COVID friendly, I'm here to help. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but that was basically it. And I bookmarked that, and I think immediately sent you a DM saying, I will take you up on that offer. Our audience are a lot of organizers or people who are in community spaces that I know need to be more COVID conscious. And I know that I normally have guests on, and I prep them before we hit record, and I tell them things like, you're kind of preaching to the choir a little bit. You'll be talking to progressives. You don't have to explain why everyone deserves a roof over their head. It's more how we get there. But unfortunately, you have an uphill battle on your hands, sometimes no matter what the political leanings are. So I'm going to encourage everybody listening right now, wherever you are on the spectrum of COVID consciousness, because it varies, people's kind of commitment and where they are. We're hoping to bring as many of you along as possible to maybe bridge the knowledge gap that might exist, not so much in knowing the dangers of COVID. We will remind you, because there's some paradoxes here that would be quite astonishing, but practical ways where you can go back to making your spaces much more safe for the people that are there, not just from COVID, but for all different reasons, especially when we're talking air quality and whatnot. So, Shira, you mentioned two organizations there, and although they're both COVID related, if that's not very, it doesn't sound very nice. It sounds like a symptom, it's
COVID combative.
But they have two completely different approaches. You want to kind of unpack that a little bit, and then I think we're really going to get into how you're holding events that are COVID safe.
I mean, they are slightly different, though we do, work in tandem pretty well. So Protect Our Province, Nova Scotia, or like what we like to call POP or Poppins.
I like that.
Yeah, Poppins is cute. It was a 7-year-old came up with that, and we've really run with it since. But that was really in response to our provincial government here removing COVID protections. And so we started as, let us try and pressure the government as much as we can to, understand that we need to reduce transmission and to make decisions based on scientific evidence and not, political will. So we've done a lot of, op-ed writing. We've done a lot of phone blasts to pressure our government and also the opposition parties. We've published, reports and surveys and things, but we've also done some community care initiatives, like we hand out N95s and rapid tests. We're trying to get air filters in schools. We're trying to do some education work. But recently, we've also been doing some community building stuff. We had a COVID safer soccer team for kids this summer. We've, host some Halloween events. This is our second year in a row that we've had a COVID safer Halloween event for kids. And yeah, Mask for Mask Queers is really about creating and hosting spaces where people who are COVID aware, and by that we don't turn anyone away, but we typically define it as people who are wearing masks in public indoor spaces, where they can socialize, connect with people, build, maintain community. So we host all kinds of different events. We just recently hosted our Halloween dance. We're going to have a New Year's Eve dance. We host game nights and movie nights, and we've done trivia. So we host all kinds of things, and people are surprised that you can hold an indoor dance party and call it COVID safer. But to our knowledge, there has not been an instance of transmission at any of our events.
And like, just judging by what I'm seeing around me, there must have been such a dire need for creating these spaces, because third spaces just stopped existing for the most part, especially in colder weather, which we all experience a lot of in Canada. And there were very few options for people to socialize, and we don't yet know the impact of that, right? We're starting to learn the impact of COVID and long COVID, but even that's just scratching the surface.
Right.
But isolation is a huge factor as well. And when we're trying to build communities around all of these movements, the queer community and so many other issues, we can't just be COVID conscious. We have to find ways to keep bringing people together as well. So
right.
Please, yes, I am also surprised. So unsurprise me, make it easier for everyone to kind of look at the spaces that they're going to bring people into. And, they're resource low as well. So there's degrees to which people can do this. But, what can you share with us that is real hands-on stuff that people can apply to their events right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just begin with a term that people may have heard in 2020, but has sort of fallen by the wayside, which is layers of protection, right? There's no foolproof method at the moment, but layers of protection can do a lot of work. So the first thing is that all our events are mask required. And we ask people to wear a KN95 or an N95 mask, not cloth or surgical. And we provide masks. And if you don't have a local mask bank in your area, if you're in Canada, the charity Donate a Mask will send you free N95 masks. They have adult and children's size. So mask availability, at least for the moment, we're really lucky, should not be a problem. They'll cover shipping and everything. You just have to request through their website. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we think about air quality, because COVID spreads through the air. So we think about the size of the space and the natural ventilation. Can we open doors? Can we open windows? Even if it's cold outside, even if you're just cracking a window, it makes a big difference. Some of our members, or the folks who come to our events, have CO2 monitors. So they'll be monitoring the CO2 to see how ventilation is in that space. And we actually learned from a recent study that, CO2 we used to use as a proxy for ventilation, but we also now know that in addition to serving as a proxy for ventilation, the higher the CO2 in a space, actually the more sort of resilient COVID aerosols are. We have air filters. The ones we use are a bit more expensive. So we have PC fan Corsi Rosenthal boxes. So the traditional Corsi Rosenthal boxes with a box fan, and that's inexpensive. You can make it for about $100. Takes less than an hour to build, just with stuff from Canadian Tire or whatever. The only downside to those, they're a bit bigger and they're louder. They are incredibly efficient at filtering the air. So if you had one or two in a space, that's you're outperforming commercial HEPA filters with just $100, $200. We use the PC fan ones though because they're smaller and quieter, and so we have folks who have their own that bring them to events. Jess, I don't know if you can see on my screen. I have one of mine next to me.
Now I
Yeah.
notice it. It was blending in with the bookshelf quite nicely.
There you go. Yeah, so I have them running in my home, and then when I go to events, I bring them with me. So that's air filtration wise. And then, of course, when the weather's good, we try to have some events outside. We ask folks to, if they're able, and now this is becoming harder as availability is becoming worse, but to rapid test the day of, and to stay home if they feel sick, if anyone in their household feels sick, or if anyone in their household has a known COVID exposure in the past week.
It astonishes me that we were ever any other way. I know there's still some people that are going out there with these death coughs
I know.
and looking around with no shame. Like if I cough
I
in
know.
public, I am just instantly, and I have a mask on. I have
Right,
a mask on.
right,
I'm still going,
right.
no, I swear, it was just a dry, I have
Right.
no water. But some people have absolutely no shame. But to think
Yeah,
that we...
yeah.
At one point, almost nobody was checking us for dragging ourselves into work because we could. Like if we could stand, if we had a shitty boss, like you just went no matter what. Like you didn't think a lot about making your coworkers sick. But I would like to think that at least floats across people's mind at a much higher rate than it did before, because yeah, like my kids, I have the luxury that they can stay home with me if they need to. But the idea of, just sending them to go make other children sick and then their family sick, even if it's not COVID, who wants to lose 2 weeks, a week with this awful cough and all of the stuff that goes around? So not to mention, this is 5 years into an airborne pandemic. When I heard you say that on I was listening to an interview of yours, that was really daunting. I mean the math is there, you're not lying. But it didn't feel right to hear that we have not really adapted our behavior all that much.
It's gotten worse, actually. Now you're less likely to have people masking in healthcare, for instance, than you were before the pandemic, because it's become so stigmatized. Just as one example, there's more resistance in healthcare to masking. There's more vaccine hesitancy has increased, not even just for COVID vaccines, for other vaccines. So in some respects, we're tragically in a worse place than we were in 2019.
That's really messed up, especially if you consider some of the parallels that you were drawing on Twitter there about death toll. If we look at how many people that we've lost to COVID and we compare it with things like World War II and World War I combined, is that the math?
So more Canadians have died from COVID, and again are continuing to die, than were lost in World War I and World War II combined. It's and that's just the acute COVID. We know, of course, that many people are dying from heart attacks, strokes, disease, etc., caused by COVID. That's not going to be counted in the official COVID death toll. So, the numbers are so alarming. I mean, COVID's still the third, according to Statistics Canada, COVID's still the third leading cause of death in Canada right this moment.
I don't know what to call them. COVID deniers, is that a term?
Yeah.
It is
Oh,
a term.
yeah. COVID
Okay.
deniers, COVID minimizers, we got them all.
Well, we got them all. They come in layers as well, right?
Yes,
It's a
yes,
spectrum
exactly.
on that side, I suppose.
100%.
It's right across there. But that is astonishing that people get away with denying these deaths or giving them the weight that they deserve. Right? We see that all the time, where there's tremendous loss and we don't react in the way that we should. But to deny, like, that these deaths can be attributed to COVID, and to really know that these are underplayed numbers that we have for all the reasons you've listed and more. The amount of people that just go under the radar in terms of healthcare, and the fact that they're not tracking the numbers in the way that they were before. It's we don't even know what we don't know.
Exactly. And I mean, I think, this idea that helped power the quote unquote return to normalcy is that, people are going to die, but, they're vulnerable people. I mean, Dr. Fauci said this in 2023 in an interview with the BBC. He said, the vulnerable will fall by the wayside. They'll get sick, they'll be hospitalized, and then some of them will die. And he said that not as a bad thing. He said that as a way to reassure people that COVID wasn't that serious anymore. So part of the problem, I think, even though absolutely everyone is at risk from COVID, for long COVID, etc., there's still this idea out there that, vulnerable people are at the highest risk and they should just stay home. and they're sick anyway. And what were their underlying conditions? All the people who died from COVID, right? So there's like a fundamental, to be frank, eugenic logic to this return to normalcy that says vulnerable people are expendable.
And I think people have this false idea of who is vulnerable.
Oh,
Forget
yes,
let's
yes.
let's shelve the ableism just for a moment. I guess this
Yeah.
is another form
Okay.
of ableism, but this idea that you aren't vulnerable because you don't have like diabetes,
Right.
asthma. I mean, there's all kinds of conditions. Some conditions you don't even know you have because you don't go to the
Right.
doctor enough, because you don't have a family doctor, because our healthcare is
Right.
underfunded. Like I think they're picturing like specifically people in hospice that are
Right.
these
Right.
are vulnerable people who are already on their way out. No, these are your parents, these are your neighbors, these are could be you and your children. And the fact that you're willing to roll the dice there and just think it might be somebody else is, to me, a real disconnect
Absolutely.
from reality. But we get that a lot. Like, people don't realize how close they are to being disabled.
Sure, exactly.
If they're not really already.
Right.
And they just tell themselves they're not.
Right. And I mean, again, shelving the ableism for a second, people at highest risk from COVID include children under 5 years old. Children under 2, especially, are incredibly likely to be hospitalized, like much more likely to be hospitalized from COVID. People over 65. And guess what? If you've had at least one COVID infection, you're now immune compromised. You're at higher risk. So, yeah, the idea that it's some sort of small sliver of the population that is on death's door is, yeah, fundamentally false. Even if it weren't ableist, it would still, it's just actually factually false.
Yeah, and I think that you can chalk that up to the fact that there's just a lack of information too. So the people filling the gaps on information are not the people you want to be filling the gaps. And you add the stigma that anybody who's worn a mask in public these days can feel, right? You instantly feel uncomfortable, if only for the fact that you feel alone, right? You are definitely part of the minority in the place that you're at, unless you're, of course, at Mask for Mask queers events in Nova Scotia, you would feel a whole lot different. I would love to be in a room with masked people again. I cannot remember the last time I didn't feel like that in my mask. I'm either in my home or outside, or I am feeling like I don't know, I go between feeling like a real weirdo because you're the only person there and you're getting looks, to like a revolutionary going like, put the shoulders back and going, why the fuck aren't you all in masks? Like getting, and you said something too, I feel like I talked to you on Twitter, but like, that's how it goes, right? Something about, I don't know if it was anti-fascist or revolutionary, but that like masking and being COVID safe at your events that you are doing to mobilize a revolution, even if you don't want to admit it, that's what you're working for. That act in itself that is part of it. And let's try to unpack together. I'm sure you've done this a lot. Why aren't all progressives COVID conscious? I know we're not a homogenous group. Lord knows we're seeing that on display many, many times, that we thought some people had our values and they do not. But inherently, socialism and a lot of the isms the good ones that we rally around, are built on the idea of community. That, it's not just the greater good as in the majority, it's the whole good, as much as humanly possible to bring everybody along. So I understand that people, when they want to make events mask mandatory, for example, they worry about people not coming because of it. I have to assume, or they just hate masking themselves. Maybe I'm not understanding, but I'm going to give progressive organizers a little benefit of the doubt that they know inherently that they probably should be masking, that they probably shouldn't be accumulating people in one room without masks, that has risks. Then they start hearing the coughing, and I know that they're thinking, ugh, these people should be in masks. So why aren't they doing it? Like, do you think I'm correct? Like, there's probably lots of reasons, but I'm wondering, they think people would
Yeah.
scoff and think they were being silly. What is holding people back from doing the right thing?
Yeah. It's definitely the answer I hear the most is we're worried people won't attend. And so I think I have a few sort of problem solves for that I have seen work. And one is to not use the words mask mandatory. Say something like masks are required and then put in brackets and will be provided. And you can, sometimes people choose to have a little blurb about, to keep this an accessible and inclusive space, we are requiring masks. To ensure that our, disabled and chronically ill comrades are included, we are requiring masks at this event, something like that. Again, having, masks, different kinds of masks at the front of the room, at the entrance, having everybody present already masked, that's like organizing and setting up, etc. And I think that most people, as you kind of implied, would be more willing to mask if they weren't the only ones, right? So there is a kind of barrier reduction when you're going to a mask required event and you see other people already masked when you walk in. I mean, I have had success encouraging other groups, like for instance, pro-Palestine groups, to require masking at their events. And I've seen people walk in and say, where's my mask? Where do I get a mask? Or I've seen people walking without a mask, literally notice everyone else masking and go get up and get a mask. So I think there's just like, in the same way that there's social pressure to unmask when the majority aren't, there's social pressure to mask when the majority are. So I think it might be potentially a bigger barrier in our imagination than it is in reality. And if you I say, just try one. Try having one event where you require masking and see how it goes. You don't have to commit to everything long term. Or, there are theoretically other options, like you could have hybrid options, or you could have, say, this event will be masked and this event will not be, etc. But I would encourage everyone to take the basic step of requiring masks, make it easy and friendly and feel like a positive thing and not this like enforced requirement, and have people lean into, as you said, that feeling of being a revolutionary, that feeling of saying, I know the government is not protecting my community, I'm going to protect my community. I know that the government is not protecting our healthcare system, I'm going to protect our healthcare system. I'm going to make sure this space is inclusive and accessible to everyone. So it doesn't need to be a sort of downer, and at your event you could thank people for masking and you can reiterate why it's important. And the more we normalize masking just in our own spaces, hopefully the more people will feel, as you said, like a revolutionary when they go out and they're the only person masked on the subway or something. And maybe the next time there'll be another person masking. And I think that's how we'll win.
Yeah, we absolutely don't have to be at this deficit where we've fallen behind, because we know how to create safe spaces. We know how to fill in gaps and lead the way in making accessible spaces. And I want to assure anybody listening that's like on the fence, you are absolutely driving people away if you do not have COVID safe events.
That's the other thing.
I won't attend them.
That's the other
I won't
thing.
attend them.
Yeah.
And I won't promote them at all. Like if I see people, organizations, even ones that I love, holding indoor events with no language on their posters as to it requiring masks in any form, we will not share it here on Blueprints of Disruption. I do appreciate that you are still trying to build community, but I won't send people into unsafe spaces in the same way I won't send them into the NDP, right? You can go to conferences for unions and Workers' Action Center, and there's daycare provided.
Right.
There are other places where we've gone above and beyond ramps when it comes to accessibility, right? Finding ways that as many people can participate as possible. And it's really shameful that we haven't acted with that urgency when it comes to the pandemic. 5 years in, and it's not just like, oh, we'll bring some people along so they have the time and we'll make the space for them. It's like, I want to make a space so I am not killing anyone or anyone they go home to.
Exactly. I think we're in an even more dire place where, in addition to wanting to take care of each other and create safe spaces, we are also in a place now where masking has not only become stigmatized, but in certain places illegal. So the best thing you can do, again, for your community, including those at highest risk, but for everyone, is to normalize masking. It's a thing that you don't just do at protests, though you should do it at protests. It's a thing you do everywhere. You're not using it just to hide your identity. You're using it to protect your community and yourself. And I think that's so important, especially at this moment where we see, quote unquote, democratic states, cities in the US, and I'm sure that there are some here to follow in Canada, pushing through these mask bans. So even if you don't believe COVID is a threat to you or your community, you know that there will be disabled and high-risk people literally criminalized from existing in community with these mask bans. They're just what people call ugly laws, what used to exist to keep, disabled people out of community 100 years ago, or out of society 100 years ago. So it's so important to show up in this way right now for so many reasons, and that's one of them. I actually just thought of another potential barrier for folks is food.
Yes.
Food and drinks, right? They want to offer food and drinks at their events. One thing we recommend is to-go bags. So say, people can take a goodie bag to go, and then you're still offering stuff. At Mask for Mask, sometimes if we want to have food and drink available, then we just ask people to step outside. Or if you need to unmask for any reason, just step outside. We're keeping our airspace safe. At other groups that are, COVID aware in the ways that I am encouraging them, but not in and of themselves necessarily COVID aware, I have arranged sort of instances where there will be places to eat outdoors for folks who would choose to, like an outdoor space to eat, and then rejoining the group that will then remask after they're done eating, that type of thing.
None of this sounds very daunting, just so you know. Like, I'm sitting there going, yeah, okay, I'm waiting. Like, the air filters even. At first, I was thinking, those are expensive. But you're right. I've seen the instructions. I will find them and link them in the show notes to make fans that you can bring as an organizer. You've got your megaphone back there. You probably have a camera and your laptop bag and whatever you use to kind of go to your event. These are not big, huge steps, but they are important ones. They're quite easy.
They're easy and they work. Like, it's not good. It's not performative. We have so many studies that show.
We had enough of that.
Yeah, that show that air filters, especially Corsi Rosenthal boxes, reduce the transmission of all airborne illnesses, RSV, the flu, colds, God knows bird flus, seems to be on the horizon. And yeah, as you said, they're not hard to build. I mean, kids do them in schools as like a project, like grade 5 kids. So it's definitely doable. And actually, one thing that Protect Our Province and Mask for Mask is collaborating on right now is a clean air library. So we've got some funding from some community wellness grants, and we're going to be building Corsi Rosenthal boxes and then lending them out to organizers or just anyone hosting an event. So you can check out if there's...
Making it
as easy as possible. So
I will spoon feed you.
So maybe in your area, there is a clean air club or something like that has, or maybe, your organization wants to crowdfund a couple for, your group or to lend out to other groups. Like it's really not super expensive. They last a long time. They use very little energy. I just leave mine plugged in my home. There's no downside to clean air, as I always tell people. Boosts mood, boosts concentration. It's healthy.
I think a lot of the part of making these adjustments and sticking with them feels a little bit like defeat, perhaps. Perhaps I think the pushback I get maybe closer to home is that, like, how long are we gonna do this? You know, like, oh my God, still. And yes, people, we've learned how to keep our air cleaner. We've learned how to not infect each other with all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Protect anonymity for folks without looking sus. Like, you're the one person in a bandana covering their face. Like, no. Like, there's not a lot of downside to there's not a lot of inconvenience to the things Shira is proposing here. We do a lot more to protect ourselves from pigs, to protect ourselves from doxing, to protect ourselves from fucking rain sometimes, honestly. So it's astonishing. Like, when you read those numbers, you tell Americans, more of you died in 2024 than in 9/11.
Oh, no, more Americans died in August of 2024 than in 9/11.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Every time you correct my numbers, it's so much worse.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wish I could get it wrong the other way, but
No,
that's
and
my
it's not
denialism
close.
creeping in.
It's not even
No,
close.
no.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the people ask me, are you going to mask forever? We all get that. But I mean, I have a few answers to that. And one is I can't predict the future any more than you can. I don't know how the pandemic's going to end, if it's going to end, when it's going to end, how it's going to end. I know it's not over now. I know me not wearing a mask and taking protections is not going to end it any sooner.
I'm not the one prolonging it, asshole.
Yeah, exactly. So why don't we just do what we know how to do now to reduce transmission? The key thing is to reduce transmission. Everything is safer if we reduce transmission, and we knew that in 2020 when we talked about bending the curve. We can still do it now. We know more now about how to do it than we did then. But the other thing is, I mask in all public indoor spaces. I haven't had, and I'm immunocompromised, I haven't had a sniffle, not a cold, nothing, since I've started doing that. Now, I am privileged in terms of I, live alone, don't have kids and whatever, but I interact with a lot of kids. I interact, with a lot of people, and masking works. Clean air works. It works to keep you healthy in a variety of ways. So it's not like a net negative. It's not defeat. I'm recognizing the situation. I'm empowered by the knowledge that I have. Other people don't have this knowledge, or they have fewer resources than I do. So I'm going to be part of the solution and not the problem, just like we're part of the solution in so many other respects with regards to capitalism and racism and climate change and all these sort of like extractive, damaging elements of our society. COVID is one of them. And we know that the government has abandoned us on this. But we also have real tools that work, that will protect people. Every time you break a chain of transmission, you are potentially saving a life. And that's what I tell people. Every time you wear a mask and you don't catch COVID in a room where there was a mask, you just broke a chain of transmission. You just helped reduce transmission. That's a big thing.
Yeah, people need to understand it's not a zero-sum game. That although, yes, maybe you have been masking and you caught COVID, perhaps, we know it's not 100% foolproof. We knew the vaccines would not stop you from getting COVID. But a lot of people, yes, they just think no matter what I do, I'm going to end up with it anyway. But that idea that no matter what precautions you take, you're definitely reducing transmission. And to think that you can be a passive resistor to this is bullshit.
Right.
You can't just understand that it's around and hope it doesn't affect you and be like, yeah, that really sucks. That's not us, people. You're not listening to this show because you are a passive spectator in the downfall of fucking humanity. No. You may not all be Shira and be able to, start making these and handing them out and spearheading these initiatives, but you sure as hell can make your spaces a little bit more COVID safe with some of these instructions. And I want to go to that, the fact that you have to fill in these gaps, the fact that the governments have left us on our own, which they do for the most part.
Right.
But when you compare it to what, say, the response is to 9/11 especially, I mean, we all know the response was wholly problematic in terms of heightened security, national security, anti-Arab racism. I'm not saying we need that kind of response.
Preferably not.
But I mean, they did not hold back. There was no shortage of funds. There were no shortage of charter rights to be infringed on or anything. It was, we will do anything possible to not have that situation again. But to think that we can expect the same from them during a pandemic, we were wrong. We were really, really wrong. All those mountains, they could have moved. They refused to. And I think I'm only able to look back at that in this way as a failure because I think when we were living in the first set of lockdowns and the government was sending out money and they were shutting down the border, and we were like, oh, so you fuckers can move, right? When there's a crisis. So you absolutely can manufacture shit really quickly and make all these huge changes that you told us were impossible and would destroy the economy forever. And you told us you didn't have any money for disabled people at all, and you still didn't, but you just had firing out cash when we still need it. You know what I'm saying? Everyone knows what I'm saying. But now when you look back at it, they didn't do shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in Ontario. I mean, I don't know, actually. We had a very bad lockdown. It had so many exceptions, it might as well not have even existed.
I remember.
It was really just reduced to the schools, and even that didn't last very long at all. People really need to understand the eugenics at play when you look at that imbalance, that their willingness to move on certain items or pretend to be moving on certain items, and who they looked at saving, quote unquote, from COVID.
And the ableism and eugenics is so apparent and obvious, because when were COVID protections lifted? They were lifted when the quote unquote general public was less at risk and felt safer, right? So now that we have vaccines, and it's less likely that a person that's not at highest risk is going to be hospitalized or die from acute COVID, that's when the protections were gone, and we were told, oh, it only really affects vulnerable people. Oh, they can just stay home, or be careful around old people, but this and that, and of course, the lockdowns and so on failed because we didn't spend that time investing in, for instance, indoor air quality, and instead we just locked down with just hoping that this would burn itself out, right? For me, and I think for progressives, what we need to understand is that the COVID response has been one of individualism, and that's why it's failed. And we know that individualism is not the way forward, right? That's why there was what we call in the COVID-aware community droplet dogma for so long. Remember, we were told to stay 6 feet apart because supposedly COVID spreads through droplets when you cough and sneeze, and they're heavy and they fall to the ground. So if you're 6 feet apart, it'll be fine. And you should wash your hands and disinfect surfaces.
We were washing our groceries.
Exactly. Those are all things individuals can do. And it's easy for an employer or the government or whatever to provide hand sanitizer and Lysol wipes, right? What we know now, of course, is that COVID spreads through the air and in aerosols that do not fall to the ground and stay airborne for hours if the air isn't cleaned. But it's much more expensive and difficult and requires a community-based, collective-based approach to implement cleaner indoor air standards and CO2 monitoring and so on. And so we know that that's what we need to combat an airborne pandemic, because it's not going to be in an individual's control, the air that they're breathing.
No, I want to just mention here that pretty much anywhere you are in Canada right now, there is probably a group organizing around your school board, pressuring your school board to do better in terms of air quality standards and reporting and whatnot. So if this is something you want to get into, a quick Google search or Facebook search there, you will likely find a local group doing that, because that is a battle in itself.
Huge battle.
The educators unions, if they're listening, they could do also a lot more in this regard in terms of keeping their workers safe and making this part of the bargaining agreement, that their air quality should be of a certain standard. You're also protecting students. I mean, that is just a no-brainer, but
yes,
just to start to incorporate this reality, even though it's sucks. That's just, it sucks. It's not Shira's responsibility to tell you how long you might need to mask. Like she said, she knows you need to do it right now. So,
and if you're part of a union, you should know that currently, if your workplace is not taking steps to protect you from a biohazard, it's violating occupational health and safety law. So you should get loud within your union about air quality as well.
Absolutely. I mean, and shout out to the people that are already doing that. It seems, and with all the battles that we have on our hands, it's hard to find people and time to prioritize COVID. So I think one of the points you made earlier, we didn't spend too much time on it, but it's important to folks who maybe, again, are not masking right now, are not creating as safe spaces as they could. The cumulative effect of multiple infections.
Yeah.
I think some people have had it maybe once or twice or more, and that's it. There's just like no precautions anymore. There's no point anymore. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know for sure that the more COVID infections you get, the higher your risk of long COVID is cumulative. And after 3 infections is where it really takes off in terms of your odds become very bad in terms of avoiding long COVID, which is a disabling condition for which there's currently no treatments or cures. We also know that more infections, cumulative infections, also can exacerbate or increase your risk of some of those post-COVID complications like heart attack, like stroke, like autoimmune disease, like immune system damage. I tell people, maybe you got COVID once or twice. Maybe you were sick for a few days. Maybe you weren't that sick. And maybe you feel fine now. First of all, and I'm sorry to have to say this, there is a lot of damage to your body that you might not be able to feel or might not even be detected in a regular blood test. And that's the scary part. But the second thing is that the fewer COVID infections you can get and the longer you can space them out, as in if you can go for a longer time in between infections, it can make a big difference. Or how recent your vaccination was can also make a big difference. So and again, the government's vaccine availability is obviously not good, but if you're, 6 or 12 months past your most recent booster and you get COVID, you're essentially unvaccinated. So it's really important, even if you've had COVID, take as many steps as you can to reduce the amount of infections that you receive, that your kids receive. There are really hopeful trials in the works right now of sterilizing vaccines in many different countries. There are really hopeful trials right now about antivirals. So I do think that the scientific horizon, at least, on COVID in particular, will improve. And, it's funny, we say like, oh my God, it's been 5 years. Another way to look at that is it's a novel virus. It's only been 5 years, Yeah, of course we don't have a sterilizing vaccine yet. Of course we don't have treatments yet. This thing is brand new and it's a nasty, nasty virus. So again, will you be masking forever? I have no idea. But is it worth reducing the amount of infections you can get? Absolutely. Is it worth protecting vulnerable people in your community? It always is, and you already know that because you're a listener to this podcast. So I know it's daunting, especially if you've kind of not been thinking about COVID for a little while now. But, we in the COVID aware community, we're here to welcome you with open arms. If you have questions, if you want to know more, if you want to connect with other folks in your community, a lot of us are on social media. Again, Googling is a great place to find lots of different resources and communities. And, we're in it for the long haul. We know there's one COVID aware writer who said, "We're not wrong, we're just early." And so we do think that there's a lot of folks who are going to really regret having not masked or not protected their kids or not invested in clean indoor air. We know the science is behind us. There's mountains of science behind us at this point. And again, we're only 5 years in. We don't know what a COVID infection does to you 10 years later. So, I really just implore you to take some steps. Take some steps, commit to starting to mask. Just try it for the winter.
Flu season.
Commit to masking in indoor public spaces for flu season, for the next few months. See how it goes. Maybe you notice you get sick less. Maybe you notice that you feel like a revolutionary instead of a pariah. Maybe you notice other people asking you about masking or masking around you. Maybe it'll be a good thing.
It definitely will be a good thing. And we know we're not all singularly responsible for fixing the problem, just as the same battles we take on all the time. It might feel like you have the world on your shoulders, but every transmission you interrupt, every positive interaction you have with someone while masked, while encouraging those safe spaces, it's not going to rub off negatively. I promise you. Not everyone will pick it up, but that's not important. There's work to be done and you folks need to be doing it. You really need to be doing it. Let's end on a high note though. Tell me some people who are doing a good job, even if you're shouting out your own group and some upcoming events that you have. Like these people are doing this, right? So I follow so many great folks on social media. I wish I could remember. I know for sure you folks in Toronto, there's a group called Masked at the Movies that have COVID-aware masking events. And in their access notes, and by the way, access notes are a great thing to have if you're trying to make your events more accessible. In their access notes, they have how many air exchanges per hour
are happening in the theater that they're showing. And that, filled me with joy when I saw it. Yeah, there's Ontario, I can't remember the exact name, Ontario School Safety, something like that. They're advocating for air quality in Ontario schools. It's been really exciting to see here in Halifax. The Halifax Fringe Festival has been requiring masks for the last few years at all their indoor shows.
Still.
The Neptune Theater has a masked show masked performance for every show they put on. So if you want to go to a COVID safer show, you could just, buy tickets for that masked performance. And that's such an easy thing that people can be doing anywhere. Have masked shopping hours at your business. Have masked performance. Have this and that. There's so many ways to, give a little. It makes a big difference. What are some other places? I mean, yeah, if you're in Mi'kma'ki in Nova Scotia, you can check out Protect Our Province Nova Scotia. There's other Protect Our Provinces. New Brunswick has one. There's Clean Air BC. And there's so many resources online. Maybe you want to start handing out N95s or just have a little area by your office or in your lobby or something. There's so many pamphlets you can print out with great information. Like, no one needs to reinvent the wheel, right? There's been a lot of people doing this for a long time now, and we believe, masks, resources, it's a giving economy, right? So you take what you need, and we're happy to share it. Yeah, if you're a mask block somewhere, or if you're working for Clean Air, or if you're just, someone who's the lone masker in their workplace or in their school, I'm so proud to be with you, and I hope more join us.
Thank you so much, Shira, for continuing to do this work 5 years on. When I heard you say we're in it for the long haul, I wanted to yell out, I hope not. I hope there comes a day where you feel like that work has been done, or we have, seen over the horizon, and people don't have to worry about it so much.
Yeah.
But until then,
we're in it for the long haul.
yeah, and we very much appreciate the work that you're doing around it. And I hope folks found this both constructive and inspiring, but even if there was a little bit of guilt tripping there, take it with, as much love as possible, because let me tell you, in the same way back in the day, and still now, folks would put a pride flag in the window of a shop, or you would somehow let it be known that your events were queer friendly. I mean, I'm glad we don't, as progressives, we don't really